everybody, this is Katie.
Hey everybody, this is Wayne.
And this is the Wayne and Kate Show. Welcome to our Purity Matters.
Session 2.
Yep, last week was like Session 1A, and this week is Session 2. We're talking more about David this week and his bad decision. The point being that David did not avoid a compromising situation, and because of that, some pretty bad things happened. Now, the Bible says that David was a man after God's own heart, okay? And for most of his time as king, that's true. But there is this one time where David made a pretty bad decision, and the fallout of that decision was extremely costly for his family and for the family of the other individual involved and for the nation as a whole. In fact, things just kind of went downhill after that. And
This was before the split of the nation. Right?
Exactly, yeah. And so it was because of David's actions that everything happened. So David found himself in a compromising position, and it was actually a position that he kind of put himself in. And so I think we can learn a lot from that, because not many of us, I don't think, probably none of us that are alive at this time, have a passage of scripture in the Bible that says we're people after God's own heart. I've never run across one that says Wayne was a man after God's own heart. And so for David to have made it into scripture, to be handpicked by God as king, which he was, and for God to raise him to power and bless him the way he did, if it can happen to David, it can definitely happen to me, right? And it can happen to you too.
Yeah.
So I think we can learn from David by looking at what happened in his life and how he put himself in a position that allowed him to be tempted, and then the results of that temptation being a fall that had some pretty serious consequences. So let's jump right in. We're going to be in the Old Testament in the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 11. And the first thing that we see is that David was in the wrong place. And that is how he ended up in this compromising situation. He was in the wrong place. 2 Samuel 11:1 says, "In the spring, when kings march out to war, David sent Joab with his officers and all of Israel. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David," that's important, "but David remained in Jerusalem." So it was pretty customary that in the spring, after the winter, that is when kings would go off to war, try to expand their territory, or if they'd had some folks maybe move into areas that they weren't supposed to, they would run them out in the spring. And it was always kind of the rule of thumb that a king led his army into battle. Now, we don't know why David did not go with his army. Maybe David had gotten to a point where his army was so strong. Maybe Joab was such a great leader that he didn't feel that his leadership was necessary. But an important point is that it was a customary thing of that time for kings to lead their armies. And David chose not to do that. Now, let's think about the fact that with all of the able-bodied men out fighting a war, what possibly could have been going on back, in Jerusalem? And I kind of have a feeling that David was maybe sitting around the castle a lot, just kind of hanging out.
Doing a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, doing a whole lot of nothing, throwing some parties, maybe playing some Xbox, like point 0.001. And, doing things like that. He might have been practicing some archery, which, by the way, in case y'all didn't know, the bullseye's worth 10 points. But he might have... Watch our previous video for that. There's no telling what he was doing, but one thing we know he wasn't doing, he was not out with his men in battle.
He wasn't where he was supposed to be.
He wasn't where he was supposed to be, exactly. And so the fact that he was in the wrong place is what led to his problems, okay? It says that David remained in Jerusalem. So David was in the wrong place. Okay, and sometimes we get in the wrong place as well. David chose to be in the wrong place, and that choice opened the door for great temptation. Now, not only was he in the wrong place, there's also a degree of this where he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Katie's going to talk a little bit about that.
So this is still in 2 Samuel chapter 11, 2 through 3. One evening, David got up from his bed and strolled around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing, a very beautiful woman. So David sent someone to inquire about her, and he reported, "This is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite." So just from the very beginning of that verse, really just the first two words, it says, one evening. What are you supposed to be doing in the evening? Probably getting ready for bed at that time. Yeah, going to sleep, laying in your bed, going to sleep.
Because like back then they didn't have televisions, so they weren't staying up to watch like Late Night with Conan O'Brien or anything like that.
When the sun went down, they got in bed and went to bed.
Yeah.
It says David got up from his bed and strolled around on the roof of the palace. And we've talked about before that David's palace was the tallest building in all of Jerusalem. He could literally see everything. He could see the tops of all the houses. And in that time, it was customary for women at the end of the day to go on their roofs and bathe. That's what they did after like the long whatever happened during the day. They're all gross. Before they get in their bed, they go and bathe on top of the roof. David knew that. That was a custom. Everybody knows that. So, and then it says David sent someone to inquire about her. So he saw that she was beautiful, and then sent for her. That was like, 4 mistakes, all like quick.
You know, one of the things we talked about last night was, a lot of us will see like a beautiful member of the opposite sex. I guess girls think guys look beautiful sometimes.
Or just cute.
Yeah, or cute, or whatever terminology you want to use. And what we said is, it's not the first look that gets you most of the time, because it's the second look. Yeah, because the first look, you're like, oh, they're pretty. It's the second look when you start thinking probably about some things you shouldn't think about. Mm-hmm. And, if David had been up there walking around on the roof and he looked down and there's Bathsheba and he's like, oh, snap, I shouldn't have seen that. And he goes back in to the house.
He could have claimed that as an accident. Like, I didn't mean to see her down there.
But second look, now all of a sudden, David is a peeping Tom. I mean, right?
Yes,
so David has gone straight from, being the palatial king to the palatial pervert. Because, he's up on the king and he's watching a lady bathe. Mm-hmm. I don't think any of us...
he knew women bathed on their roofs. That was common. That was the custom. So what he should have done was turn around and go back to bed. But instead, he sent for her to find out who she was. And then, even after his servant, I guess, came back and said, that's Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, he should have said, oh, she's married. Then that's that. It should have stopped there. But didn't quite stop there.
Stupid mistake number 500.
Yeah.
Right? Because he should have been off at war, number one. He shouldn't have been up at whatever hour of the night it was. He should have been in the bed. Yeah. And, knowing the kinds of things that went on. And I can't prove this, but I kind of have a feeling that because, he's the king of this culture, right? Mm-hmm. I kind of have a feeling he knew that there was a chance some women might be bathing on their rooftop, at that time of the night. And, maybe he went out there expecting to see something. We don't know this, but this could be the Old Testament version of like getting up in the middle of the night to look at porn. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so he's sneaking out there and, he sees this and you're totally right. The moment that the servant says, hey, she's married,
he should have said, oh, that's that.
But isn't that how Satan gets us, though? Like, by degrees? It's like one of the things we talked about with the guys last night is, normally the first temptation is not a sin. Mm-hmm. You're just tempted to do something that maybe is not wise, but not necessarily wrong.
Yeah.
And then the next little thing, it's like another step, and maybe it's a little more wrong than the first one, but maybe it's still not sin. And then the third step is a little bit more and a little bit more, and that's how Satan does. He if he can get you to take that first step, then he can move you a little bit closer to the edge until all of a sudden, boy, he just grabs you and pulls you over. And I think that by the time he got to the servant coming back saying she's married, he's so committed. Infested. Is that what you said? Infested, or what is the word? He's so infatuated that at this point there's no going back for David, and he just continues down the path of stupidity, right?
So ultimately, being up at the wrong time resulted in David being exposed to temptation, more temptation than it started with, just getting out of his bed and going to the roof. Like Wayne just said, it got worse and worse and worse. And it kind of goes both ways too. It's been said to me before that whenever you're tempted, like at like the lower level, like you were just talking about, and you say no, it makes it a little bit easier to say no the next time.
Absolutely.
And then no the next time, like like that.
Yeah, it's like building muscles, right? We're in a group that's doing P90X.
Yeah.
And we all took off over the holidays, like for a whole month
To eat.
to eat. And so we all came back like 5 or 10 pounds heavier, and our muscles are now shrunk again. And so like the first night, it was like murder.
Awful.
Right? But then the next night was still murder. But what we're hoping for is that as we go forward, right, it gets a little bit easier every time.
That's what happened last time we did it. So
yeah, so we're assuming that'll happen again.
Yeah.
But that's the way it is with sin. When you're tempted and you resist that temptation, it's almost like you build up kind of spiritual muscles. So that next time it's a little bit easier, and the next time it's a little bit easier, and then you get to the point where that's really not even a temptation to you anymore. On the other hand, once you give into a temptation,
it's harder and harder to say no. Yeah.
So it works both ways. So, all right, so here's what we've learned from David so far. He was in the wrong place, and he was there at the wrong time. And ultimately, that led to, that's really bad. And that's kind of a hard video to watch, but that little rabbit, right? He didn't even see it coming. You know what I'm saying? Maybe we should back it up and watch it again. Pay attention, though, to the moment of impact. I know it's hard to watch.
It's awful. I hate it.
Pay attention, though, to the moment of impact, and tell me what happens to the rabbit. Okay? All right, here we go. I saw a bumper come off of that car and some pieces.
Yeah, it's not really a rabbit anymore.
It's like the little rabbit exploded, right? Okay. As hard as that is to watch, it is so telling, though, because that is what happens when we don't avoid compromising situations. We end up getting hit by sin, and a lot of times it comes out of nowhere. So this is what happened to David, right? I mean, 1 minute he's chilling in the passel. 1 minute he's chilling in that's the combination of a palace and a castle.
And a castle, that's what you call your cabin.
He was chilling in the palace, and his guys are off at war. He's not necessarily doing anything wrong. Next thing you know, he's kind of getting up out of bed in the middle of the night to go take a walk around on the roof, and then I've just been exposed to something, and then next thing you know, boom. Sin comes out of nowhere, and here's what's crazy. Is that rabbit in the same condition after the impact as he was before?
Not even close.
Do you think there's any way that the rabbit could be returned to his previous condition?
Not by himself, no.
Yeah, I don't even know if all the king's horses and all the king's men could put that rabbit back together again. Okay? And see, that's so it's so vivid, the picture of what sin does to us. So many people's lives have been utterly destroyed and blown up even, and the consequences have been so great for the sin, and the sin came out of nowhere. It's like they didn't They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing some risky behaviors, engaging in something that was maybe a little bit spiritually dangerous. And then next thing you know, boom, out of nowhere, they've committed this sin, and life, for the rest of their life will never be the same. Not only will their life not be the same, the life of other people involved will never be the same. I can't tell you the number of people that I've been introduced to over the years who decided to get behind the wheel of a car after they'd been drinking. The result of which was lives that were changed forever. The number of people who, I think last week you said, avoid the back seat of a car.
Yeah, we said that again last night.
Yeah. But the number of people who have made decisions to have premarital sex or some kind of a adulterous affair or something like that, and the fallout was irreparable. Families destroyed, jobs lost, futures forever changed. And so we need to realize that when we put ourselves in positions that open us up to being compromised, then we are asking for something like this to happen. And that is exactly what David was doing. He put himself in a position that led to something that destroyed his family. And it really did destroy his family. After this, nothing was the same. The child that he got Bathsheba pregnant, and the child died. The ripple effects that this had in David's family were just irreparable. He had sons who hated other sons who killed other sons who raped their half-sisters. And then Solomon came along, and Solomon saw the crazy things his dad did. And so then Solomon had some weird things of himself going, 700 concubines, 300 wives. I mean, this dude had 1,000 women, right? And then that just led to all kinds of problems. And it was after Solomon that the kingdom was divided between the northern kingdom of Israel, southern kingdom of Judah. So this one action didn't just blow up David's life; it blew up David's family. It blew up the nation. And that's the lesson that we need to learn. Why do we avoid compromising situations? Because they have such potential for utter destruction. Yeah, to be disastrous. And so the final lesson we learn from David then is that the result of being in the wrong place at the wrong time is often wrong behavior. Look at 2 Samuel 11:4-5, where it says, David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to him, he slept with her. Now she had just been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Afterwards, she returned home. So here's what really just kind of gets me mad about the whole David thing. David brings this woman to his house, and let's face it, he's the king, and she's just a regular woman. And a regular woman doesn't say no to the king. So at the very least, this was intense sexual harassment. But I think it is actually more along the lines of rape. She couldn't say no to David. And so he gets her pregnant. She doesn't know this after this is all done. He sends her home. And she is supposed to evidently act like nothing ever happened. David had his fun. He sent her home, and he's going to go back to life, as normal. And then she finds out she's pregnant. It says the woman conceived and sent word to inform David, I am pregnant. And so we know the rest of the story. David goes through an inordinate amount of trouble to have Uriah, her husband, brought back from the front line.
Really just a twisted
Yeah, you can't even make movies like this, right?
Crazy.
And this is definitely not Hallmark material. No. So he has Uriah brought back. He tries to get Uriah drunk so that he'll go sleep with his wife. First of all, he tries to just encourage him to go spend some time with his wife, and Uriah's like, no, how can I do that while my countrymen are out fighting a war? So Uriah had more honor than David did. He tried to get him drunk so that he would go do it. That didn't work. He stayed at the doorway of the palace. He wouldn't go home. And anyway, eventually David sends Uriah back to the front lines with a letter to Joab, which is for all practical purposes, it's his death certificate, because in the letter he is instructing Joab to put Uriah on the front line, and then when the fighting is the fiercest, pull everybody back so that Uriah would be killed. And this happens, and then David brings Bathsheba into his house, and now what does David look like? David looks like he's this big hero, this great fighter for David, died in battle.
So
and
he takes in the poor widow. Yeah, kind of.
Man, it's twisted.
It is, yeah.
Until Nathan shows up, Nathan the prophet, and Nathan really schools David, right? And David ends up repenting, but just because he repents and just because he asks God to forgive him, that does not do away with the consequences, and the consequences are horrible. And so David was in the wrong place. He was there at the wrong time, and the result of that was wrong behavior. Listen, I think it's important for us to comprehend that David, being a man after God's own heart, I don't know that any of us can say, hey, I would never do that. Hey, I'm much more spiritual than David was. Yeah. I mean, there's this whole book in the Bible called the Book of Psalms.
Yeah.
Which are praise songs and
written mostly by David.
That David, he brought all that together. And so there probably was not a man that ever lived who praised
Jesus.
That praised God more, right? And who tried to follow God more. But this one incident changed everything. So we have to be very careful about allowing ourselves to be in compromising situations. So what's the takeaway? Well, we need to avoid the wrong places. And last night we talked with the guys and the girls. We split them up and we talked about what are the wrong places. And so, Katie, what were some of the wrong places that you guys identified in your girls' group?
Well, I had listed some things being alone in a house by yourself with a boy, alone in the car in some, parking lot, just completely alone. And then some of the girls talked about parties, which was good that they recognized that is a wrong place.
Yeah, if you're a Christian and you get invited to a party where there's going to be drugs, drinking, and maybe sexual behavior, parents aren't home, as a Christian, do you go, well, I'm going to just go and I just won't partake, No, you avoid the wrong places.
It's so much harder to go and say no than it is to say no to going.
Yeah, that's good. You don't go and say no. You say no to going. Yeah. That's good. Katie Davis, right there.
Patent pending.
Copyright 2018. All right. So for the guys, it was a lot of the same. Talking about, not being at home with your girlfriend when there's no parents around. But also we said, bedrooms are for sleeping.
That's what I told them. Well, I told them that you said that, but we talked about that.
Yeah, bedrooms are for sleeping. So guys, there's never a good reason that you should be in a girl's bedroom or a girl should be in your bedroom. Bedrooms are where you let your guard down. I mean, there's nothing more... There is no time that you have your guard down more than when you're asleep, right?
True.
And so bedrooms kind of there's something about them that just screams intimacy. And so when you bring somebody into that, you are in the wrong place. You're inviting trouble, okay? And we talked about the parties as well, but we also talked about, being out of bed when everybody else is in bed.
Yeah.
We talked about computers in your bedroom. Because, nowadays computers are a portal to any evil thing you possibly could want to access. And so I believe that having a computer in a child's bedroom, you're putting the computer in the wrong place. There's no accountability there.
Yes.
At our house, all of our computers stay in the living room or the kitchen or the dining room. None of our children are allowed to take computers into their bedroom. Our children are not even allowed to have their personal electronic devices in their bedrooms, like their phones and their iPads.
That just eliminates the temptation completely. As a
Yeah.
parent, I think that's really, really important to have those type rules in place.
Yeah, so I have like a 16-year-old son, and every night at 9 o'clock, he has to plug his phone in the kitchen, and he's not allowed to get it back until that morning the next morning when he wakes up, because I just know having that stuff in those areas where you're out of the view of other people, they're in the wrong places.
And I've heard it said before, like, well, I trust my son, I trust my daughter. They wouldn't do that.
A whole nation trusted David.
Well said.
Right?
Yeah, no, so right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it happened to him. If it happened to David, it can sure enough happen to your son or your daughter.
And
or
I would
to
venture
you.
to say that every one of us, every single person, has somebody in our lives that we trusted that failed.
Yeah.
Some people that we had up on a pedestal and we thought it would never happen to them, and they failed. So, yeah. Right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So, avoid the wrong places, avoid the wrong times. One of the things I said with the guys last night is nothing good happens after everybody else is in bed. David's a perfect example of this, right? But I'm going to tell you, the temptation level rises when everybody else is asleep and you're sitting in front of a screen.
Yeah.
And I promise you,
There's
Satan,
no accountability.
there's no accountability. And Satan is a crafty, sneaky little enemy.
And one thing that you said last night was that the Bible doesn't say that Satan wants to bite you or push you or pinch you. Satan wants to destroy you, devour you.
He's
He
prowling
wants you
around
like a roaring lion.
looking for someone to devour. And
Yeah.
listen, we talked last night with the guys. We said, do you guys know how lions hunt? You know, you don't have like this herd of, I don't know, water buffaloes. By the way, do you know what the buffalo said to his son when he sent him off to college?
What?
Bison.
Oh my God.
Anyway, you don't. Yeah, that was free. You don't. The whole thing's free, but that was double free.
Oh,
Listen,
okay.
but you don't have like this herd of water buffalo, and the lion just marches up in the middle of them and goes, "I'm here to eat you." You know, they stalk.
They're gonna
From the
pick out
grass,
the most vulnerable
they pick
one.
exactly. They
Yeah.
pick out the most vulnerable one. They wait for the right time and they ambush, and that is what Satan does. And I think that is why Peter uses the concept of Peter being like a lion, because he stalks
Satan
us.
being like a lion.
Yeah. Did I say Peter being
did.
like a lion?
You meant
Yeah.
Satan, it's
Satan, not Peter. That could be a whole nother lesson right there.
Yeah, we won't. Yeah.
Because, one time Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan."
Yeah, he did.
That's free thing number 2. Go check that out.
Read up on that in Matthew.
But anyway, Satan is he's waiting. He's trying to create opportunities. He's trying to move you into opportunities where he can come out of ambush and get you. So avoid the wrong times. Also, when you're tired,
We talked about that.
you're going to be more likely to give in to temptation. When you're stressed, you're going to be more likely to give in. Bored, exactly. An idle mind is the devil's playground.
Yeah.
Right? We've all heard that. When you are frustrated, you're going to be more likely to give in to temptation. So in those times, those are the times that you really got to have your guard up. Right? So what were some times that you guys talked about? Surely we didn't cover them all.
We talked about how whenever you're mad, like you just said, frustrated, whenever you're super mad, somebody did something to you and you're hot, you're so mad. You call up your best friend and you just start going crazy. Like you're just like, I can't stand that girl. She did this and that. That's not purity. We really tried to address that a lot. Specifically for girls, gossip, I think, is a bigger problem than it is for boys.
Yeah, and we talked about with the guys, when you're in the locker room and all of the rest of the guys are telling their like filthy jokes or saying whatever, that's a time that you don't need to be involved in. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you pull away from that. You avoid those times, because when they're all going on like that, you're much more likely to be pulled in and join them in that. You know what I'm saying? And something that we really didn't talk about last night, but parents and grandparents, this is something for you to address. But hormonally speaking, There are times for guys and girls when they are much more prone towards temptation. And so those are the kind of conversations that as a parent and a grandparent, you need to be having with your children and saying, hey, look, there are times when you're going to feel more tempted. And those are the times that you need to have your guard up, extra. So avoid the wrong places, avoid the wrong times, and that'll help you avoid the behavior. We spent a good bit of time last night kind of identifying behaviors that we should be avoiding, and I'm sure you guys did as well.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. We really spent a lot of time talking about wrong places and wrong times.
Yeah, because here's the deal. Let's face it. If you can avoid the wrong places and the wrong times,
you can avoid the behavior.
You'll avoid the behavior. And listen, that's where another word, accountability, comes in, and intimacy. And I'm working on my doctorate right now, and I'm getting ready for a workshop called Mid-Career Assessment. And one of the things that we're talking about in this workshop, where you're supposed to kind of look at your career kind of halfway through your career, and kind of take stock of where you are. But one of the things is talking about intimacy. Well, we kind of think of that word in a sexual way, but intimacy is not. It's just intimacy. The definition of intimacy is knowing and being known. And the fact is, very few of us have intimacy. Like, so many of us, we have all these secret things, secret sins, secret things that we don't want the rest of the people to find out. And so we are never authentic with anybody. They never really know us for who we really are. And what that does is that creates a shame in us. Shame is the product of a lack of intimacy, And so when we're up in the middle of the night and everybody else is in bed, all we're doing is killing our intimacy with the people that are around us, right? Whenever we have a secret sin that we're being unwilling to confess and move past, all we're doing is killing the intimacy around us. But get this, when you avoid the wrong places and you avoid the wrong times, that actually increases your intimacy with other people because you don't have anything to hide.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Integrity.
Yeah. And when you don't have anything to hide, it actually it helps your relationships with others, right? And so we hope you were encouraged by all that. Avoid the wrong places, avoid the wrong times, avoid the behavior. And look, I'm just going to be honest with you. Some of you parents need this as much as your students, right? Because the statistics are pretty strong when they talk about the number of Christians who are addicted to pornography or,
and I think a lot of people think that stuff like that goes away when you get married, but I don't think
we
that's
talked
how it
about that
works.
last night.
Yeah.
And I told the guys, I said, the problem with porn is that it changes the way, like, there are scientific studies that prove it literally changes the structure of your brain, the same as using heroin or cocaine or anything like that would. It's like a drug
Stimulates
addiction.
that same part of your brain. Yeah.
And so what happens is, as that's happening, you're also learning to think about women in ways that no godly woman would ever want to be thought of, right? So like the women that are in these pornographic movies, they are doing things and acting in ways that no godly woman would ever act, and they're doing things that no godly woman would want to do. And the fact is, because I was just reading not long ago about a porn star who became a Christian back in 2012. She's married to a youth pastor now, but even she says while she was doing all those, she didn't want to do those things either. The pornographers make it look like this is what a woman wants. She didn't want to do it. You know why she was doing it? Because they were paying her $3,000.
It was a job.
It was a job. And so
actors.
what's happening is, and moms and dads, if there was anything that I could say to you to really help your young men, is that you have got to help them never, ever, ever get the mindset, a pornographic mindset in their minds. We know of people, we know of folks, guys who have acted very lewdly, who have done things to girls that they shouldn't have done. And the things that they're doing to girls are what they're seeing on the internet. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so these young men, and now it's young ladies too, because the latest statistics say that just as many girls are addicted as guys. And they're learning things that they're then carrying into their marriage. And if we're trying to raise Christian men and women, then we're hoping that they're going to grow up and marry a Christian woman. So what happens when you have this boy who has grown up looking at this stuff and thinking that that's the way a woman is, and then he marries this godly woman, and all of a sudden she's not like that?
He's not going to be very happy, and that addiction is not going to go away.
Exactly. It's going to continue, and it's going to destroy his marriage. It's going to destroy his family. It could destroy his profession. And so, you know, parents, we have a responsibility to help our children avoid the wrong places and avoid the wrong times. And I'm telling you, if we can do that, we can help them avoid the wrong behavior. That's your job as a parent. If I could say anything to you today, your job as a parent is to help your child set boundaries. And if you don't help them set boundaries, they won't set them themselves.
No.
Right?
Everybody has a sin nature. Everybody has temptations. And sometimes you just need somebody to be there and go, no, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm going to remove that temptation from you entirely.
And if you assume that they won't do something wrong when they're put into a tempting situation, you're part of the problem. Because they have a sin nature just like you do.
Yeah.
And you know, here's the deal. When we are in a tempting situation, we have at least a 50% chance of choosing wrong. I believe that the more things we have in our lives that are sinful, that goes up. So like 60 or 70% chance of doing wrong, right? But we have at least a 50% chance of doing wrong. I don't want my kids faced with those odds.
No.
So I'm going to help them.
Lessen it, yeah.
Right? So, whew, boy, that got real there at the end, y'all. I'm just saying. But you know what it is?
What?
It's the shred igniter.
Oh, my God. Even when you drink it, you just sound like you're going,
look, this stuff right here just like lit me up. You know what I'm saying? I should drink.
It's so gross. Oh, goodness. Don't drink it.
It's got sand in it.
Sand. He said sand.
Or maybe
it's got sand in it.
Maybe it's sheetrock dust. I don't know. Woo, but boy, does it light you up. Hey, thanks for watching our show. And I really hope that you found this material useful. And parents, we want you to use it with your kids.
Yeah.
So tomorrow, tune in, and I'm going to have a quick thought tomorrow.
And I'll have one Saturday.
Yep. And then we'll see you back next week with our regularly scheduled stuff.
Yep.
Go check us out. Go check out our Instagram page.
Oh, yeah, we made an Instagram. The link will be below.
Wayne and Kate Show on Instagram.
Yep.
And then, hey, you just watched. You might as well like.
Yeah, go ahead, like it. Share it.
And then
there
subscribe.
are other parents that need to see this too.
Share us on your social media platforms. We want to get our message out.
Yeah.
And so you help us do that. Anyway, we'll talk to you later. I am Wayne.
I'm Katie.
See ya.
Thanks for watching.